Good evening to everyone. Certainly hope that you've had a good afternoon, and I am glad that we can be together this evening to give our worship and praise unto our Lord once more. As I mentioned this morning at the close of our services, we want to spend some time in 1 Samuel chapter 25, and I want to talk about a wonderful servant unto the Lord, a woman by the name of Abigail. She eventually becomes a wife unto David, and you learn that here in chapter 25. But what we're going to see in this chapter is a woman who really comes to the rescue of not only her husband, but also to David in keeping him from doing an evil that he was planning on accomplishing. And we see God blessing her through her wisdom and blessing David through that wisdom as well. You know, the Old Testament, we're told, is here for our learning, for our admonition. And as we look at the men and women of the Old Testament, we're to learn from them. We're to learn what to do and what to be and what not to do and what not to be. And I think there's some great lessons for us as we look here at the events recorded in 1 Samuel 25. What we're going to see is that there was one person who was rude. There was one person who was governed by rage. And there was a third person who was seeking to restore. So let's look at the event, and then we'll go back and notice those three individuals. When you look in 1 Samuel chapter 25, you remember at this time that David is on the run. King Saul is after him. He is trying to kill him. And so David has his men with him. He has a group of about 600 that are going throughout the territory of Israel. Now they're up toward Carmel, toward a place called Maon. And there they are kind of hiding out to avoid Saul and his armies. Well, there happens to be a man that lives there who is very, very wealthy. His name is Nabal. And the Bible lets us know something about his wealth. Look with me at verses 2 and 3. It says, "And there was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance. But the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb." Now, that factors into this story, him being from the house of Caleb. Caleb was from the tribe of Judah. David also was from the tribe of Judah. So they were kinsmen in this way. But we're introduced to this man who had so much, 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats. I don't know that I've seen that many sheep in my lifetime. I like to tell people sometimes that I met the man in Ohio who has the largest sheep farm. I asked him how many he had. He said he didn't know. He kept falling asleep when he tried to count them. Well, I guess that Nabal was something like that. Now, they had a practice back then. And actually, this practice still goes on today among the Bedouins. But the practice was to allow the sheep to roam. And often they would be away from where the man lived. And that was the case here. They're about 2.5 miles away from him. But the shepherds are watching them. But throughout this region, there are marauders. And there are people of different nationalities who are attacking cities. We've read that in 1 Samuel. And they would be happy to steal someone's sheep. David and his men, while they are there, provide protection for the herds, the flocks of Nabal. The men will actually say that David's men were like a wall around us. No trouble came to us while they were there. And it was commonplace then for the person who owned all the flocks to repay those who provided protection. Now, I know at first glance in our world that sounds like the mafia. You're paying for protection, but that's not the way it was. This was the way that they did things. And so what happens is David is going to send 10 of his men. That gives us some indication of how much he was expecting to receive. It was going to take several men to bring it back. And so he sends the 10 men to Nabal and explains to him that they have provided safety for the flocks of Nabal so that nothing happened. Will you please repay us? But look at verses 10 and 11 and notice how Nabal responds. And Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who is David, and who is the son of Jesse? There be many servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my flesh that I have killed for my shearers and give it unto men whom I know not whence they be?" He really says, I am not even going to give you a pitcher of water. I'm not going to give you anything. And so he treats David and his men with great disdain. These servants bring back word to David. And David's first response is, guys, get your swords. We are going to wipe out every one of the males among Nabal's people. We're just going to kill them all. And so they're getting ready to do that. Nabal's servants, they know what kind of man he is. They go to Abigail, Nabal's wife, that woman of great understanding and a beautiful countenance. And they explain the situation unto her. Look at verses 14 through 16. One of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, "Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them. But the men were very good unto us, and we were not hurt, neither missed we anything, as long as we were conversant with them when we were in the fields. They were as a wall unto us, both by night and day. All the while we were with them, keeping the sheep. They were nothing but good to us." They knew this practice. They knew that their master should have responded by giving some sheep unto David's men, some goods unto them, but he had not. And I don't know how they knew that David's servants were upset or that they were going to be coming. We're not given that information, but they were fearful. And so they go to Abigail and explain the situation to her. What Abigail does is very quickly gather together a huge spread of gifts to take unto David and his men. She actually sends those goods on before her, and then she comes to David, and she asks David to be forgiving toward her. In fact, she is going to intercede on behalf of her husband, and really, she says, put the blame on me. Look at verses 24 and 25. Here is Abigail, and she falls at his feet and said, "Upon me, my Lord, upon me, let this iniquity be, and let thy handmaiden, I pray thee, speak in thine audience, and hear the words of thy handmaid. Let not my Lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial, even Nabal. For as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, thy handmaid, saw not the young men of my Lord whom thou didst send. She says, put it on me. I'll take the blame. If you have to take your fury out on anyone, take it out on me. She explains a little bit to David what she has to deal with. She is married to Nabal. Nabal's name means fool. I don't know how he gets that name. I told Tammy this afternoon, maybe they let the mother name the child and she named him after his father. I don't know. I don't know. But that's his name, and you know what? He lives up to it. And she's had to deal with this. She knows what kind of man he is. And so she has come with these gifts, and she intercedes. Put the blame on me. She then explains to David how she knows of the good work that David has been doing. He fights the battles of Israel. That's really what King Saul should have been doing, but King Saul is pursuing David. But she knows David is going to be the next king of Israel. I don't know how she knew that, but at least it seems the people of Judah understood that David was in line to be the next king. And as she talks to him, she explains, David, you don't want to do this because you don't want this blemish on your record. When you become king, that you, in anger, sought vengeance upon someone from your own tribe. It's remarkable, really, when you think about David getting to this point. Folks, in the chapter just before this, he had spared the life of King Saul, the king who was trying to kill him. And yet now he is slighted and he is ready to go after blood. It would have divided Judah. I mentioned earlier that Nabal was from the tribe of Judah, David's tribe. And when you study through 1 and 2 Samuel, you learn that it was the tribe of Judah that always stood behind David. The likelihood is if he would have killed Nabal, it would have been a blood feud. That tribe would have been divided, and it would have been a source of difficulty to David throughout his reign. And so when David hears all of this, he responds like he did when Nathan confronted him. Remember, we talked about that last week, that idea of seeking forgiveness, going back to God's way. He's not upset with Abigail. He's thankful for her. He sees in her someone who really has been sent by God to keep him from taking out this vengeance. His anger is appeased. He accepts the gift. And Abigail is able to go on her way. Now, when she gets back home, Nabal, her husband's throwing a big party, and he's drunk. And she waits till the next day to tell him what's happened. And we're not given all the information about what happens here, but the Bible tells us that when she tells him, his heart becomes as a stone. And 10 days later, Nabal is dead. Many people think that when she told him, he might have thrown into some kind of rage, and it brought on a stroke. And then 10 days later, he dies. Now, whether that was the case or not, we don't know. But we do know that just 10 days later, this man leaves this earth. After David gets word of that, he sends messengers to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. She responds by saying, just let me be your handservant. But she comes with 5 of her maidens, and she becomes a wife unto David. And isn't it amazing? Here's a man who wouldn't give David even a pitcher of water. And in just a little while, evidently David had everything that man owned, because he had Abigail now as his wife. And this may have been the very way that David is supported until the time that he becomes king, because it's going to be over 20 years before Saul dies. And so the wealth that Nabal had may have been what supported David throughout that time in the wilderness. Well, you look at these events, and they're fascinating when you see them recorded for us here. But I think there's some people that we can see in this account that we can learn from. We need to make sure that we don't make the mistake that some of them made, and we want to be like some of them in the way that they responded as well. So let's talk about those three individuals that we mentioned earlier. The first one was rude. There was a person that was rude, and you know, of course, who that was. That's Nabal. Nabal was rude unto David and his servants, and it's not surprising because the first thing that we read about him there in verse 3 is his name is Nabal, and then the latter part of the verse, but the man was churlish, the King James says, and evil in his doings. Churlish carries with it the meaning of being rude with a mean spirit. So it's even more than just being rude. This was the kind of man that he was. Later in verse 17, his servants would say this unto Abigail about Nabal. Now therefore know and consider what thou wilt do. For evil is determined against our master and against all his household. For he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him. Anybody know someone like that? No, don't raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. Because I imagine that we all do. But certainly that's not the way for us to be. He was churlish. He was mean-spirited. He was rude. You know, he was a very wealthy man. We read about that. And I can see in someone like Nabal, someone who thought of himself being better than everyone else. What I think and what I say matters, and what everybody else thinks and what everybody else says, I don't care about it all. I have done all of this. When we were reading there, did you notice all those my's in there? He thought he'd done it all on his own. And so he's this churlish individual. You can't even talk to him. He's so rude in his dealings. You know, we live in a world that is becoming more and more rude. Tammy and I lived in Tennessee for a while. And when we got there, we had to get used to some of the customs there. Some of them are just different, not better or worse. Some of them I really, really love. I loved that the children, teenagers, when they spoke to adults, they addressed them as Mr. or Miss. I was Mr. Tim. Mr. Tim. Tammy was Miss Tammy. I know we're married, but they didn't call her Mrs. Tammy. It was Miss Tammy. And that's just the way they do. And if they didn't do it, their parents were telling them, hey, who is that? I'm sorry, that's Mr. Tim. You know, most of the time when somebody says Mr. Hatfield, I say, oh no, that's my dad. You know, I'm just Tim. But I like that because there's a little respect there. And that's a good thing. There's too much rudeness in our world. Anybody ever see the outraged customer going after that salesperson? Maybe you've been that salesperson. Don't tell me of the times that you've been that outraged customer. But you know, the customer's always right. So you feel sorry for the person who has to deal with that rude individual. Or how about the person who's on their cell phone when it's supposed to be off and talks so everybody else can hear them? I was at Walmart the other day, and this fella came in, and he wasn't talking on the phone, but his cell phone was blaring his music as loud as could be. And I thought, how's he know I want to listen to his music? And by the way, I didn't. It wasn't my style of music. And I don't think anyone else wanted to listen to it either. That's rude. How about the person that is always interrupting or can't wait for someone to get done talking so that they can jump in? There are a lot of rude things that people can do. How rude are people when they're driving? I was reading the other day about a basketball game. This basketball game happened at Southern Miss University. And they were playing against a team, and one of the fellas from the other team was from Puerto Rico. And the band started chanting toward that fella, "Where's your green card?" Folks, last time I checked, Puerto Rico belonged to the United States. But how rude. And I'm sure that we could talk the rest of the night sharing examples of great rudeness. Young people, there's a reason why your parents try to teach you to say please and thank you. Common courtesy. You hold the door for people. That's a good thing. You give up your seat for an elderly person. You don't park in a handicapped place unless you're the one that's handicapped. Just some decency. But that's not Nabal. He was curlish. He was rude with a mean spirit. Folks, that can't be us. It can't be us. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 18, we're reminded, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Colossians 4 and verse 6, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how you ought to answer every man. By the way, how rude are people in their speech? The way that they use our Lord's name and the vulgarity that comes out of their mouths that the world calls adult language. I don't think there's anything more childish. Nothing adult about it. It's just rude. Our speech is to be with grace, seasoned with salt. And remember what Jesus said in Matthew 7 and verse 12. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. In general, I know that there are exceptions, but in general, people are going to respond to us the way that we treat them. If we're rude, they'll probably give it right back to us. But if we'll show kindness, in most cases, again, I know there's going to be exceptions, but in most cases, they'll be kind to us. Let's make sure that we don't follow the example of Nabal, that foolish man, that curlish man. There's no need for us to be rude in our dealings with each other and in our dealings with the world. Here's the second person. We have one that was rude, and we have one person who was filled with rage. And of course, that was David. Think about David being that man after God's own heart. And yet, here was one who so quickly became filled with rage. His servants come back and tell of what Nabal had said, and his response to his men is, gird ye on every man his sword. And they girded on every man his sword, and David also girded on his sword, and there went up after David about 400 men. About 200 of them stay back with the stuff. They are going to wipe out Nabal and all his male servants, all his kinfolk. Going to wipe him off the face of the earth. He's that angry, that quickly. He was in a rage. You know, we'd like to think that doesn't happen with good people, right? Good people don't get angry like that, do they? Surely none of us, right? That doesn't happen to us. You know, I've been around us people enough to know, and I know this about myself, there are things that could happen before you get home tonight that might make you, that would tempt you to act like David did. We had these precious little girls up here singing those songs before services began. I almost hesitate to say this because I don't want any of them to get an idea, but what if one of those little girls threw a rock at your new car? What would happen? Oh, man. I've got a truck that I like. My granddaughters, they want to play hopscotch. Throw this rock and go get it toward my truck. Don't hit Papa's truck. They said, yeah, but I said, no buts. And we went round and round because they kept saying, yeah, but no buts. I ended up moving the truck. But you know, there are things that can happen. I don't know what they might be, but they can happen so quickly. I hate to tell you this. I was playing basketball several years ago, and I was getting the better of this fella. And I had gotten by him again. I was going to make a layup, and this may not sound like that big a deal to you, but it was to me because it hurt. He grabbed me from behind, and I was trying to jump, and he held me down. Hurt my back. Just wrenched it right now. You wouldn't think that'd be that big a deal, but I can't get that high off the ground, and it took a lot, and so it hurt. I felt my fist clench. Just right now, over a foul in a ball game. Now you're saying, boy, I better not tell him I didn't like that sermon. But I'm just saying, it can happen to anyone in an instant. Maybe you're having a bad day. Maybe there's 3 or 4 things that have already happened, and then there's just one more. But you know, we can't be that. Oh, David was so he flew into that rage. He's ready to wipe him out. He was so thankful for Abigail. You're sent by God. I'm so thankful you stopped me from doing this. Folks, we can't be those people that are filled with rage. James chapter 1 and verses 19 and 20 tells us, wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. When we are angry, how often do good things happen? I'd challenge you to find one. Because most of the time when we're angry, it's for a selfish reason. It's not like when Jesus became angry over the hardness of the hearts of men. In Ephesians 4 and verses 26 and 27, we're told, be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. Be thankful for that person who keeps you from doing something in anger. There was one that was rude, there was one that was filled with rage, and there was one who was seeking to restore. And that, of course, is Abigail. You see her there in verse 24, going to David and saying unto him, upon me, my Lord, upon me let this iniquity be. Folks, that's something you see Moses doing. When God was going to destroy the Israelites, Moses interceded for the people. And here Abigail is doing that for a husband who isn't of much count, and the men that are there. Let it be on me. She's seeking to restore, to make it so that things are right once more. She says to him in verse 28, I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thy handmaid, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord fighteth the battles of the Lord, and evil hath not been found in thee all thy days. Don't let this evil be found in you now. She reasons with him. She intercedes. And she's seeking to restore. And how that needs to be us. Because there is so much rudeness and there is so much anger. There are these situations that arise. But Jesus tells us, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And when we find ourselves in those situations, let's heed the advice that Paul gives in 1 Corinthians 6. Remember, they were taking each other to court? And that in front of the heathen, and it was giving the church a bad name. And so he says to them, now therefore there's utterly a fault among you, because you go to law one with another. Why do you not rather take wrong? Why do you not rather suffer yourselves to be defrauded? Your mother ever tell you have to be the bigger person? I don't want to be the bigger person. Do it anyway. That's what we're being told. If anyone has to suffer the wrong, let it be me. That's okay, I'll deal with it. Because I want to restore. I'm going to do everything that I can to live peaceably with all men. And when you think about this idea of restoring, think about the erring brother and how we have that obligation toward those who have gone away from Christ, to do our best to bring them back. James closes his letter by saying, brethren, if any of you do err from the truth and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins. Let's be those peacemakers. Let's follow the example of someone like Abigail, who was seeking to restore. Folks, when you look at the account that's given here in 1 Samuel chapter 25, you see those three individuals, Nabal and David and Abigail. One was rude. That's not going to be us. One was filled with rage. There'll be things that make us angry. But let's make sure that even in our anger, we sin not. And let's be people who seek to restore. Be those peacemakers that our Lord would have us to be, so that we can continue to be called the children of God. Let me ask you tonight as we close, are you one of his children? Have you put on Christ in baptism for the forgiveness of your sins? Have you been added to the family of God? If not, would you make this the night that you come to him? It is the greatest blessing that any human can have, to be a part of the family of God. And he offers it unto us through his Son. And if you're here tonight as one who has obeyed, but you've fallen away and you need to come back, we'd love to pray with you and for you. Folks, it's heaven's invitation. And if you're subject in any way, won't you come as together we stand and sing?